today's agenda is going to contain a pretty open discussion item, which is our next agenda item. And I want to introduce this by saying that as a group, and Heidi Hogan, our co-chair or vice chair for the council, isn't here today, but as a group, we sat down to talk about strategic planning for our watershed council over this next year. I think as a group, this body has a lot to contribute to both our local watershed based and also our statewide watershed feedback. We've got some statewide projects on tap right now, including the state water policy, state water plan, where we'll be giving feedback. And in order to develop our Jordan River Watershed Council strategic planning, what we wanted to do was get an idea from all of you about what your top concerns or opportunities are for the Jordan River Watershed, how you've been addressing each concern, what limitations or barriers do you see, and then how can this Watershed Council be a resource for you as you move along. So the way I thought I'd structure this discussion is rather than calling on people randomly, let you guys volunteer, but if I don't get volunteers, then I will call on you randomly. And have you state your name and sort of the geographical area or the organization that you are representing. We're going to use that information to sort of code all of the responses to kind of get a sense of what's up for people in different parts of our large watershed. When we talk about concerns or opportunities for the watershed, I want us to think broadly. So that could be anything from, water supply for current and future generations. It could be water infrastructure. It could be water quality. It could be ecosystem health. It could be rates. It could be just a huge variety of water related concerns or opportunities. So don't limit yourself. Whatever's coming up for you around water within this watershed. This is a really great opportunity for us to really start to understand what is up in our watershed. Ultimately, I'd like to also be able to report on what's up in our watershed to the State Watershed Council, where I serve as our delegate, and kind of give a sense at that statewide level what's going on in the Jordan River watershed. We hear a lot from the other watersheds across the state, so it's really useful and interesting to see just how different each basin is. I'm sure John with the Division of Water Quality sees that on a daily basis, but we all don't get to see that very often. So with that, we'll start our discussion. And this isn't just limited to Watershed Council members. Guests on the meeting are welcome to participate as well. If you could raise your hand online, it might be easier for us to see you, but if not, you're welcome to just unmute and start talking as well. Okay, who's first? Okay, Sylvia.
Just a quick reminder for those in the room, Ren will bring around the microphone. Our OWL recording devices unfortunately don't work great in this large of a room. So just make sure you've got the microphone when you're speaking in the room so that those that are online can hear us well. Thank you.
So I guess this is more general, but I'm gonna mention it anyway. It of course has to do with the watershed. So my name is Sylvia Catton, Mill Creek City. So I think a lot of this just came up for us recently. Soren's always talking about different grant opportunities and all different state money, even sometimes federal money that cities can utilize to make their part of the river better. And it goes into water quality, of course. I think everything ties into water quality, because what you're doing at your river, what you're doing at your riverside affects water quality. But one thing that I think could be helpful for, at least from my perspective and in a city perspective, is there's kind of a gap between my staff, because we don't have any water experts on our staff, of what things that we could do or use grant money for to improve water quality or improve the general ecology of our riverbanks. So maybe like not necessarily ideas, but also just like a general guideline of, every 10 years, every 20 years, your banks need to be looked at by an expert. And by the way, here's a list of experts, and it would have to be updated, but just ideas of ways that we can use grant money, because I think for Mill Creek, we're very heavy on grants and pursuing them. And our grant writer recently came to me and said, hey, there's this money. What would you like to see on the Jordan River? And we have some ongoing projects, and we have a very small river frontage anyway. And he talked about water quality. He said, is there anything? And I was like, I don't know. I'm not the expert, but let me find out. Let me do some digging. And he did his own digging, and we actually came up with a different idea altogether. It had nothing to do with like water quality or bank stabilization. But I think it would have been helpful. And then if there's things that we could do that are upstream that we're not thinking of, because I think a lot of times I think of the Jordan River, and in my mind, it goes right to the banks of the river, but truly we should be thinking about the entire system, the upriver, the streams and the creeks that feed into it. So ideas for grant money and how that can be utilized from year to year would be helpful. And then just further on that, things that I'm not thinking of, that our staff's not thinking of, that affect water quality that we could use grant money for. So it's just a general.
Excellent feedback. Thank you.
Einen Wendelin Knoblauch from Midvale City. And one issue that comes to mind immediately for me when I think of the Jordan River and the watershed is unhoused homelessness. And, that's an area where the cities have a few tools, but not too many. But for the watershed, I think that's pretty important. And that, along with stormwater runoff, I believe all cities have an MS4 permit of some sort. I don't know how effective that is. If there are any ways to help the cities to sort of get to the next level in that. I mean, I know just from personal observation, I see parking lots that have salt piles stacked on them, road salt, where anyone with common sense would say the rain is going to hit it and the salt is going to wash into the storm drain, is going to reach the Jordan River, for example. So I wonder if at some point there needs to be a systematic look at what systems do we have, as a state and in the municipalities in place to address the issues, and is there some way how we can take this to the next level?
Great, thanks.
Excuse me, I'm Brad Perry from the Northwestern Shoshone Nation. Largely, we are located in the Bear River Watershed. However, we're the only Indian tribe in the Bear River, Weaver River, Jordan River, Salt Lake watersheds. And so we have a lot going on. We currently have a project in southern Idaho, in Cache Valley. So we are quite literally upstream from everybody. The one thing that Sylvia, is okay if I? Yeah. Thanks. That brought to mind is there are a lot of people that have those sorts of questions because they don't have people. One thing that we might want to think about is, if someone's going for, if person A is going for a grant, there's a lot of us in this room that work on those and have the professionals that can come out and just take a look, or just even review grants and what you're looking at. And if we all know what we're doing and sharing that information of, okay, here's what we did here, because it's all very similar. There's a lot of ways, I worked for the Bureau of Reclamation for 20 years. If you improve water quality, you improve water quantity. And that's one of the biggest issues that we have. So I would just say, looking together, if you wanted to have a repository of what projects and programs you're working on, Soren's always been really good at keeping me up to date. Soren, we just signed our NIFWIP agreement yesterday for 4.2 million. So we have a lot going on, but we want to be helpful wherever we can, because there's a lot of things that maybe other people don't know about.
Building on this momentum, this is Rachel with the Jordan River Commission staff. Talking about grants and resources and all these things, and having this watershed council, we're stronger together and we can have stronger grant applications if we're combining our projects together. So that's something to think about, is, that's why we're here communicating together, so that we can know what everybody's interested in working on, and see what we can do to combine our efforts, so that we can strengthen and go after bigger grants, and most likely, hopefully get them.
Really great feedback so far, everyone. Thank you.
I'm Don Tindy with South Jordan City, and it's nice to be back. It's been a few years since I've been at this meeting, and I just want to put a plug in for some of the things that South Jordan City is doing and has looked to doing, and that's our water reuse project. Hopefully that's helpful and seen as beneficial to the watershed, and things that I've appreciated that the commission has done and the Watershed Council has done over the years is to advocate for best practices. And some of the work that's been done, it goes to what was just said, for combined advocacy. So if we work on those best practices together and we take them back to our jurisdictions and use them within our own use, as well as use them for educational purposes with the community and with the public, so they better understand why we're doing this. I just personal experience I had up in doing some hiking on the East Bench up in the Sandy area, and there's a lot of signage up there about watersheds, and it gives an opportunity to talk to your children, grandchildren, about what it is and why it is, and why you can do things and things that you can't, and then just a real good educational standpoint. And so those are some things that come to my mind.
Do you, maybe after Eric, do you mind talking a little bit about your water reuse project?
Thanks. This is Eric McCulley. I will be petitioning the governing board to become an ex officio member at some point. I was the chair of the Watershed Council in my previous role. I've been thinking about those ideas for a while, and a couple things to consider. Maybe in the the water bill or the sewer bill, just have a little flyer that says sweep the fertilizer into the grass, and then targeted outreach to the companies that do landscaping, because I see that all the time. Fix your leaking outdoor irrigation could be another really simple best practice. Creating bioswales anywhere you're doing redevelopment, make sure that the stormwater has, like a place that it gets filtered, and then some biological activity to actually burn off some of the nutrients for nutrient pollution. A big issue we have right now is there's a lot of organic material in the bottom of the pipes. And when it rains, which it doesn't seem to rain very much lately, but that first flush of rain, you're gonna see a massive drop in the oxygen in the river because of the biological oxygen demand. So you can go, you can start at the river and work your way up, pulling out that biological material. That sounds like a dirty job in dark underground places, and it is. So coming up with practices to do that, whether it's back trucks or whatever, because those things, I mean, it just, you see the immediate effect, of when we get that first rainstorm. And encouraging people, of course, to clean up their, you know, their storm drains and things like that right now, not after the first rain, but right now. And I mean, I've been thinking about this for a long time. Tim and I, maybe started considering this when he was with UC, educating kids about it. But we have to educate the kids about it, get them working on it too, because it's an issue and we can't do it alone, and we all have to work across the entire watershed. And I'm happy to, you know, participate as much as I can, but it's gotta be everyone doing, you know, those easy things, but starting at the river and getting that biological material and working your way up. Or at the waterways, or at the storm drains or whatever, and then those innovative storm water management techniques and low impact development is gonna be critical for us to do something across the watershed. So restoring the riparian areas is good, cleaning up garbage, but that's something to think about.
Thank you, Eric.
And I'm not the technical expertise on the water use, so I probably can't speak to it as well as some of our staff that are working the project and have for the last few years. But we're taking we're losing a lot of gray matter. That was a Freudian slip, sorry about that. Taking the gray water, cleaning it up and putting it back into the river at this point in the pilot program. But eventually that could potentially be reused and put it into a system. But we're doing a pilot program now and hope to be able to expand that to a larger program in the near future.
Great, so potentially a water quality and a water supply project. Okay, great, thank you.
Lisa Hartman, Salt Lake County. I think the biggest thing from our perspective as Salt Lake County is managing flood control, meeting that need for safety for our community, along with the recreation, for our residents as well. And there's always that push and pull. One of the biggest things I think that we're looking at, we have so many projects and not enough money, but a big one that's top of mind is the lower Jordan River and those levees. They are functioning, but if FEMA were to come in and try to certify those, we probably would not meet that. And we've done a study on it. It's about I think he said 20 million to do it, and that's, you know, and part of what we know would have to be done is there's a lot of trees that probably would have to be removed. We know that residents don't want those removed. And trying to figure out how we can plant trees. We did do this in Wheeler Farm, where we planted trees where we could and took them out where they could not remain. But one of the things that we've been talking about internally as well is that all of our stormwater from the entire county ends up in that area. And yet I think a lot of it falls to, okay, well, that's Salt Lake County and Salt Lake City. Well, it's all of our stormwater. And one of the things that we've been talking about is how do we bring the state into the conversation of, we need to be looking at Salt Lake County as a whole in terms when it comes to water, because water doesn't have a home. Just because that's where it ends up doesn't mean that that's where it started, so.
So Lisa, are you talking about more kind of like an integrated strategy or plan amongst the communities in Salt Lake County in our ship to address like the
address infrastructure, I think when it comes to, and also what's like the second thing to that is, we can always put infrastructure in, but I don't think it should be kind of considered
an extra to do recreation with it as well. It costs maybe a little bit more to add recreation to it in a way that meets the flood control needs. But sometimes those are like, okay, well, even if you get money, let's say from the federal government, it's like, well, just do what you need to do to bring it up to compliance. And I think we've all learned that just doing that extra on recreation is important as well. But we are looking federally at getting some financial support for that, but just in general, I think the state is not looking at Salt Lake County from that holistic purpose and infrastructure on meeting that needs, and that would be helpful to us, I think.
Fantastic, thank you.
I'll just second that sentiment because, at least for Mill Creek, I think it is truly important, and it's one of those things that people don't realize the importance until it's too late. And, in Mill Creek, we have a floodplain up near in Olympus Cove, which we're going on 10 years of trying to solve this, and it's taken that long because we've had to go to the federal government, we've had to work with the county, we've had to do planning, we've had to pay for it, and even though Mill Creek has residents that were very proactive about bringing that up to code for personal reasons that affected their properties, and they were willing to put in money, their own money, to help fix it. It was much larger than just a couple of neighborhoods. And I'm not as familiar with the land that you're talking about, but from personal experience in our city, it is a big deal because it doesn't get fixed in 1 or 2 or even 3 years. It takes, we're talking at least a decade, right, to get everything up to code, and even after that, it has to be revisited. So I'll just second that priority in infrastructure and floodplains and all that. And obviously, this summer we can look elsewhere in the country and see that these things are actually really important. So I'll second.
Great, do we have anyone online who had anything to add? Just checking.
Hi, I'm John Mackey. I'm Division of Water Quality Director. I mean, all these things are part of my world, so I could go on and on, but I'll try to be more succinct. The stormwater is very much on our mind, even though sometimes it feels like we just don't get any rain. And as Eric said, then when we do, then we get flushes. There is a really well coordinated organization, right? Group of cities, the MS4s have good connections. There is inconsistency. Some of the complaints that we hear, inconsistency across cities or MS4s in how those are enforced, and so how waters are protected. That's a really difficult thing to unify because there's 96 MS4s. And they're all working within political context as well as trying to do their best to run cities for all city purposes as well as stormwater. I really like the idea of BMPs, and we sort of touched on this in our meeting with the Utah Lake Authority yesterday. Trying to figure out, well, what are the big water quality problems? What are the big sources? How can we get the best bang for the buck? And it's difficult. It's difficult to say it's stormwater or wastewater or industrial or growth. But the idea of everybody doing their part, mash the button, sorry, of everybody doing their part from the smallest scale on up. Without necessarily having to have a regulatory hammer, to make little improvements at the local scale that translate into larger regional improvements. And what much of that comes down to, of course, is education, and how we just continually get the variety of information out, whether it is Um, as Eric said, sweeping your nutrients back into your yard when you have fertilized or raking the leaves out. I think having that continuous message of having BMPs at the fingertips of individuals as well as on up through our agencies and municipal organizations, so that we all have in mind all the time, trying to elevate our improvements in water conservation as well as water protections in day to day. And I think we can really make, I believe, when we talked about this a fair bit yesterday, that there's really room for a lot of improvement in water quality without necessarily having to have regulatory action.
Thanks, John, for your expertise and always working with all of us regulated entities as well.
If you want to ask a question about grants and things, by all means, give us a call.
I wanted to add just a few things that we're seeing from Salt Lake City's perspective as well. I definitely second all of the conversation on water quality and funding for infrastructure and funding for projects. That's something that we are concerned about both on the stormwater and wastewater level, which falls under the Clean Water Act, which is in John's purview, but also the drinking water side of things and the Safe Drinking Water Act. And from that end, we're always looking out for emerging contaminants and what will need to be put into place in order to mitigate emerging contaminants, things like forever chemicals, PFAS, are the regulatory world around that and the public health concerns around that are both on the drinking water and on the wastewater side of the equations. We are also keenly aware, as I'm sure all of you are, but I'd like to hear more from you around your awareness or concern around water quantity and water supplies for your communities. In the Jordan River Basin, a lot of our drinking water comes from diversions within the Great Salt Lake Basin, and we know that Great Salt Lake is not doing well right now. We're asking residents to conserve, but we're also seeing, are moving into longer drought cycles where water supplies are a little bit more uncertain. And then the other part is infrastructure and funding infrastructure, whether it's aging infrastructure on the drinking water side, the stormwater side, or the wastewater side. It's all very expensive right now. And there is uncertainty in the cost of that infrastructure built into bids that we're receiving in order to update aging infrastructure especially. And the burden of those costs falls on our ratepayers at the same time that other costs that they're seeing are increasing. And so I think like some challenges, and I really appreciate what's been said around working on communicating best practices within our watershed council. I think that is important for the water quality side, but also for some of these other issues such as water conservation needs, especially during drought cycles, in terms of how best we can take care of our water infrastructure, whether it's flood control facilities or drinking water facilities. I'm curious though, how many on this council have your own utilities or water departments, or do you work with an outside entity on that? I know we provide water to Mill Creek City.
We have some of our own.
We have some of our own wells. Salt Lake City provides just a little bit of the Fort Union area. And the Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District is probably the biggest provider.
Ben, did you have anything to add from the forestry fire state lands perspective?
Well, first, one thing that comes to mind is that, we do have $53 million in grants that were released from the Great Salt Lake Commissioner's Office and the Bureau of Reclamation, for some water related projects to benefit Great Salt Lake. I think there's a great opportunity for, potential infrastructure upgrades, and resulting water savings to be dedicated to the lake, so you can kind of kill two birds with one stone. And I think that was something that you said, Laura, as well, that I thought was maybe something I'm hearing across the board is there's infrastructure demand and upgrades and things to be considered. And I think one risk that we have to, not only the Jordan River, but the Great Salt Lake and whole watershed is we fix things and become more efficient. And we're seeing these efficiencies result in less water getting to some of these areas. So as we're thinking about efficiencies and upgrades, I think it would be great to consider how we can have a win for the natural resources as well. See, I did have a couple other thoughts. I do think one area that we're exploring and trying to get creative with is we're thinking about water right transactions, whether they're leases or purchases of water rights for the benefit of Great Salt Lake. I think we're oftentimes the watershed, and this is something I'd like to explore with the state engineer board as, we're targeting areas in the watershed where we can benefit Utah Lake and Jordan River and, all the way to Great Salt Lake. Those are the kind of transactions I really think we can get a good bang for our buck. And I think timing as well. I mean, there's periods of the, in the year where the Jordan River almost has zero flow. So if we can think about, leasing water in times where we can, improve flows and try to mimic the natural hydrology of the river, I think we'll see a lot of improvements that way as well. So those are maybe the things that come to the top of my mind.
Great feedback. Thanks for letting me call in. Soren, did you have some things you wanted to add?
I want to make sure everyone else has had a chance to contribute. I don't want to be redundant, and I want to make sure we're hearing from everybody. A couple of things that I think are really top of mind for me. The communities that are at the bottom of the watershed, I'm thinking particularly Davis County and North Salt Lake. You wouldn't dare swim in the river. And then I go down to Utah County and Lehigh and Saratoga Springs, where people swim in the river a lot. And we hear frequently, I wish we could swim in the river. And it is notable that you can, but a lot of people don't. The Utah County stretch of the river isn't necessarily top of mind. We see kids jumping off of bridges and all kinds of activities in the river. Not right now because there's a harmful algal bloom, but much of the year, it's a really popular place to get in the river. And so clearly the urbanization that's happened is really affects the water quality. And, we've been brainstorming as staff about how to connect with the really broad population. Salt Lake City's done some innovative work with stormwater treatment with the Rose Park Cornell Wetland Area project that we visited a couple of years ago for a field trip. But those are expensive projects, and transforming our stormwater systems will take time and a lot of money. I was a couple of years ago this fall, I was paddling with somebody who wanted to show me something near his home in the Glendale Poplar Grove neighborhood. And while we were there, it was in mid-October. It's about a week after the first major snowstorm. And usually right after a snowstorm, the water that's coming out of the storm drains is just really filthy. And you can see everything that's flushing out of the system. And it's a whole different perspective when you're in the river. But this was about a week after the first snowstorm. And the water coming out of Three Creeks confluence in the culvert under 13th South was crystal clear. It just blew me away because I'm like, this doesn't exist on the Jordan River, and yet here I was witnessing water coming out of the Three Creeks tributary that was crystal clear. And I stuck my paddle in because I could read the wrappers of the potato chip bags on the bottom of the river and the tin cans for soda pop and stuff like that. And I stuck my paddle in to see how deep it was, and it was probably 4.5 feet at least. It was almost my full paddle. So it really, was encouraging to witness that and see that there are possibilities for getting tributaries that are coming out clear to the river. But I know it will take an enormous effort and the entire community to make the connections. We've been doing some brainstorming with some education folks over the last couple of months with an intern that's been working with us this summer. And there's a lot of interest in getting school kids, elementary, secondary school kids involved in thinking about these kinds of things. The brainstorming sessions were really incredible. And I think there's a real untapped opportunity there to link education and help make the connections that wherever you are, you're connected to the watershed, from the top of the watershed to the bottom of the watershed. And until we transform our infrastructure, there's a role that everybody plays. So I'd love to continue thinking about how we work with school kids and maybe religious groups and any others. I've had some really positive conversations when people want to get involved in doing a service project around the Jordan River for like the 9/11 day of service. They said, where can we go on the Jordan River to do service? And I'm like, actually, the best thing you can do is to do a service project in your neighborhood and clean up around your home and your church and your park and your school, because that's one of the biggest challenges that the river faces is water quality. And no matter where you are, you're connected to it. So I think there's a lot of opportunities to use days of service for those kinds of activities. The other thing I'll mention just real quick, a couple of years ago, some of you remember that we were working with Representative Galen Benyon on a riparian ordinance. This one hit really close to home. I'm trying to do this without being emotional. I was in Texas over the winter holiday and visited a close friend who lives right on the San Gabriel River north of Austin. And we sat on his porch and had a great visit. He contacted me the weekend after the 4th of July. And of course, we heard what happened in Kerrville, because that was in the news a lot, but it was devastating in all of central Texas. He told me that his mother not called him at 6 a.m. and said, get out of your home. He probably wouldn't have survived the flood. And he walked through waist deep water with his dog swimming next to him to higher ground and watched his home wash away. And talk about, an impact on why we need to really understand the power of rivers. Those kinds of events don't happen very often, and we forget from one generation to the next, because we don't often pass the history of flooding and things like that through our stories. But when they do happen, they're really, really devastating. And I would really like to revisit the riparian ordinance. We had a great TAC meeting a couple of months ago where we heard from Salt Lake City and Saratoga Springs and Lehigh, who have developed riparian overlay zones. Lehigh City, I think, has the most substantial overlay zone, which is 300 feet or more across their entire Jordan River frontage, and really giving the river room that it needs. Building new floodplain, West Jordan's building new floodplain just down the hill from us here, even while we're sitting in still in many places where floodplain is being filled for new development. So that's something that I'd like to really put some energy behind as a watershed council, to think about those couple of things, how we improve water quality and how we really think about riparian areas. And it's going to take the whole partnership of the commission and the watershed council to tackle some of those big ideas, but I'd like to really see us put some energy into those. Sorry for being a little long.
That was great. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm Scott Peters. I'm the president of the Jordan River Foundation. I'm not sure that what I'm going to say is new to the whole discussion, but I want to say it as an emphasis of the things that we've been talking about. I think one of the most important things that we can do is preserving, restoring, and enhancing the corridor's ecological function and the habitat around the corridor. And there's a lot in that. One being
exactly what Storm was just talking about, which is responsible development and encouraging development to occur in the right places that allow us to have access to the river and recognize the river as the amenity that it is and can be, but also making sure that we preserve the habitat and the connections between those habitat areas that are so important. And along with that goes the invasive species and weed management control, whether it's Phragmites or Russian olive or puncher vine, et cetera. Another really important thing is water quality and water quantity. I remember when we formed the Jordan River Commission, and prior to that, you know, we all know the Jordan River was looked at as someplace you did not want to go. And a big part of that was water quality. And as we've been working on that, people are recognizing that it is an amenity and continuing that and providing enough water in the river to support both the ecological functions as well as the recreational functions, I think is really important. The other is community access and education, and educating people on the value of the corridor as a community resource, whether it's the natural resources, the human resources, the cultural resources, helping them understand what activities and opportunities are available to them along the corridor, ways people can protect, preserve, enhance the corridor, getting people to the river itself and to the corridor, and providing multi-use and varied activities for that meet a wide range of interests so that people have lots of different reasons to go to and enjoy the corridor. I also feel that maintaining and enhancing the human quality of the corridor is important, whether that's in building and maintaining trails. One of the biggest challenges to, you all know, it's not capital development, it's the maintenance once something is developed. How do we ensure the resources to maintain the facilities that we do build? It's providing nodes and parks and open space, education centers. And it's also about protecting health and safety, whether that's removing in-river hazards or flood control, as was mentioned, access to emergency services, homelessness, so many different things that go into that health and safety component to it. Those are my thoughts. Thanks.
Really excellent and thoughtful feedback to you and everybody today. I think we could probably spend a lot more time digging into this watershed and the types of things that we see as concerns or opportunities. We heard a lot today, and so our team is going to go back and put together some summaries of kind of the key themes that came out today. And at our next meeting, we'll come back to you with sort of outline of what our strategic plan looks like this year. Heard a lot about funding and grants or access to different types of funding for infrastructure that could improve water quality and water quantity. That seems to be a pretty strong theme with the group. So among other things, so we will take that back and get back to all of you. Since we meet every 2 months, if there's anything that crosses your mind that you'd like to reach out and talk to us about, don't hesitate to reach out. I think it's appropriate to reach out to Ren, and she will pass along to us to include in sort of our synopsis of issues and concerns. And we will also come to you with some agenda items for our next meeting as well. So with that, we just have one one piece of Watershed Council business. And that is the adoption of our April